But we start with the big breaking news in the last hour or so, and Newcastle United midfielder Sandro Tonali has been handed a 10-month ban from all football by Italian prosecutors for breaching betting regulations. Let's cross live now to St James's Park and speak to Keith Downey. Keith, talk us through exactly what this entails.
Yeah, it's the news we've been expecting for the last 48 hours, isn't it? That Sandro Tonali has agreed, in essence, a plea bargain with prosecutors over in Italy to serve a 10-month suspension from world football, which will, of course, take him until next season. It will take him until the end of August 2024. So with that, he will miss the remainder of this season. Of course, lots of games to play for Newcastle United and for his country, Italy. He'll miss participating in the Euros in the summer as well. And then he will pretty much miss pre-season, and he'll return as the season is just underway next season. So a long time for Sandro Tonali to miss. Now, the punishment would have been longer had he not agreed that plea bargain. And part of the plea bargain includes an 8-month rehab programme for the Italian. So he'll have to work alongside the authorities, essentially like a community programme that you would see over here in the UK. He will have to travel to Italy, I am told, on 16 separate occasions over the course of the next 18 months to meet with young footballers there and do his bit for the community. So essentially a rehab programme to run concurrently with that 10-month ban from football for Sandro Tonali. We're also told he will receive a €20,000 fine from the FA in Italy, and of course, as I say, he will miss the Euros at the end of the season for Italy as well. So a big punishment there for Sandro Tonali. You remember last week we told you at his hearing in Turin that he admitted to gambling on football matches and also football matches in which he played. Now, it didn't come out that he bet on his team to lose, but there was information that was given to us through our colleagues over in Sky Italy that he did bet on matches involving AC Milan, matches that would include them winning. So we don't have official confirmation yet from UEFA. That is going to come very soon. But the agreement now is in place for Sandro Tonali to be banned from football worldwide for the next 10 months and to take part, as I say, in that community programme at the same time.
Keith, we just saw a few minutes ago there Sandro Tonali scoring on his debut. I remember you were at the game against Aston Villa, and Newcastle fans had their jaws on the floor thinking what a talent that they'd signed. Where does it leave them in terms of that hole in midfield? And, of course, the fact that they paid £55 million for this guy and he's not available for them.
Well, look, I think they still do have a talent on their hands. We saw him come off the bench last night here against Borussia Dortmund. I thought he did very well in that second half. And yeah, you mentioned that match against Aston Villa. He was superb in his debut, scored within, I think, the first 5 or 6 minutes of the game and gave a man of the match performance afterwards. But Newcastle, of course, are going to have to do without him from now until the end of the season. It does leave a big hole in their squad. They don't have their injury problems to seek right now. Eddie Howe last night telling us that Alexander Isak is going to be out injured for a short amount of time. So too the midfielder Elliot Anderson and Jacob Murphy, who came off with a shoulder injury last night. So difficult situation for Newcastle in terms of injuries. I think for Tonali, it's going to give him a time to try and get his career and his life back on track. I would imagine it's been a very difficult time for him. His manager Eddie Howe last week said at his news conference that it was an emotional couple of weeks after he was pulled out of the Italian international squad amidst these investigations 2 weeks ago, and he said it's a time for everyone to throw their arms around Sandro at the club and support him. He's had that support from his manager. I believe he's had it from his teammates as well. And we saw it from the supporters on Saturday, didn't we? After that 4-0 win against Crystal Palace, the supporters took him to their hearts. The Newcastle players pushed him forward, and he took the acclaim of the supporters at the Gallowgate end who had waited around, who showed that they're behind him. Now, the information I'm getting from our colleagues in Sky Italy is that he will still be able to train with Newcastle United over the course of the next 10 months. And as they understand it, he'll be allowed to play in behind closed doors friendly matches as well. As I say, we don't have confirmation on that just now, but it sounds as though Tonali will still be able to be based here in the UK if he decides that that's what he wants to do, if the club decides that is what they see fit, as long as he travels back to Italy for those 16 community sessions over the next 18 months with young footballers and authorities over there in Italy.
And Keith, that'll be so important. We've heard Ivan Toney talk about this in terms of his mental health and being able to train and to play in friendlies. That's going to be crucial, being out for such a large period of time. 23 years old. He luckily, for his side of things, does have the years to play, doesn't he, in the Premier League, or whether that's back in Serie A later on. But as you mentioned there, this applies to international football as well. That is a huge blow for Italian football fans to lose Tonali for the Euros.
Yeah, just on your first point there, I think it's important to mention that because the mental health side of things is very important. And as you say, we've heard from Ivan Toney on the subject. We heard from Eddie Howe on Friday saying that Sandro was completely devastated, and you don't know what's going through a person's mind when they make these decisions. Look, I think Tonali agrees that he has to be punished and he has to serve a suspension. That is why his legal team agreed to this with the Italian prosecutors, and he's worked alongside them. He's been very transparent. He's given up his devices so that he can see what's gone on over the last few months and years. But I think his mental health needs to be taken into account as well, and I think that will happen as part of this rehab process. It's not going to be good for him. It's going to be difficult being out of the game, and I think it's been really difficult for him missing the Euros with Italy. Of course, remember, they're defending the tournament as well, but it's going to give him a time to sort of look back on what's gone on over the last couple of years, and I suppose to try and right those wrongs with that community programme. So yes, he's young, plenty of years to turn things around, but difficult situation, I think, for the Newcastle as well, because they signed a player for £55 million in the summer from AC Milan. Obviously, they did not know that he had this hanging over his head, and I think the interesting thing now will be whether Newcastle decide to take this further with a legal perspective, whether they're going to look into this legally. Could they maybe uncover whether AC Milan knew about this before he was sold here in the summer? Because it did seem like an unusual signing at the time. It was a big one for Newcastle, spending that amount of money on an Italian international player. I know Newcastle were overjoyed to sign him, almost a little bit surprised that they managed to get him. I think the question now turns to what did AC Milan know at the time? And I think Newcastle will sort of leave no stone unturned. I think they will be, deciding whether they feel they can look into this in the weeks and months ahead. But I think the most important thing right now for Sandro Tonali and for the football club is that they get him into a good position. He's going to have to just deal with this 10-month ban from football. Perhaps his community programme over the next 18 months will help him on that side of things. And Newcastle, in a football term, are just going to have to deal. They're going to have to look at it really as though one of their top players has suffered a leg break or a serious knee injury and misses the rest of the season. I think that's the only way they can look at it. But what they have said